Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to this video. I'm Venkat and this is just me an open source channel. Right, in this video let's see how to provision a Kubernetes cluster using Kubespray. So earlier I did a video on Kubespray that's about the vagrant provisioning. So you use Kubespray and then they have got a vagrant file which will set you up all the required virtual machines and so on. So now if you've got servers or machines that you want to use as Kubernetes nodes, we can use Kubespray. It's completely automated and you can use Ansible playbooks. So Kubespray uses Ansible playbook to automate the cluster provisioning. So it's going to be very useful, very helpful. It's a production ready multi-master if you want, with etcd cluster with multiple worker nodes. You can add more worker nodes, you can add any node, you can add a master node, you can add an etcd node, you can remove any nodes. So everything will be done by running an Ansible playbook. Alright, so for this video, I've got my host machine, which is not my laptop, but I've got a server with 16 CPU and 32 gig of RAM, twice as much resource I've got on my laptop. And in this video, we're gonna set up Kubernetes cluster on these 4 nodes. Alright. So I have 4 virtual machines. I'm still using virtual machine and I'll be showing you how to use Kubespray's Ansible playbook to easily provision the cluster. Alright, so all of these are Ubuntu 18.04 virtual machines and we are going to have an additional node that's going to be our Ansible controller node. So from that machine, we will be running our Ansible playbooks. Alright, so we will be cloning the Kubespray repository on this machine, and we will be running the Ansible playbooks from this machine that will configure all these machines as Kubernetes nodes. So in this demo, we're gonna see how to configure the first 2 nodes, node 1 and node 2 as master, and etcd will be a cluster with 3 members and 1 on each of these node 1, node 2, node 3, and all the 4 nodes are going to be Kubernetes worker nodes. All right. And in my future video, I will show you how you can add an additional node and how you can remove nodes and so on. So for this video, we are just going to set up a simple Kubernetes cluster with 2 master, which is multi-master, high availability, and then use Ansible to provision the Kubernetes cluster. All right. So let's go to the next slide. And with that setup with Kubespray, when you're done with configuring your cluster, what you will get is this one. So we will have 2 master nodes where the API servers are running. And then let me close this to show you the bigger mode. All right. So the worker nodes all will have an local Nginx proxy by default. Because we have 2 master nodes, how would we connect? Which master node should we connect to? So for that, all these worker nodes will have a local Nginx proxy running, and it has an internal load balancer. So this Nginx proxy, this worker node, will go through this Nginx proxy, which actually load balances the request between these 2 master nodes. But when you want to use kubectl on your machine to connect to this cluster here, you will be connecting to one of the master node because we haven't set up any load balancer. All right. So that's the internal load balancer, and we can also set up an external load balancer. By default, if you just use Kubespray, run Ansible playbook, you get a cluster and that won't have any external load balancer. So when you're connecting using kubectl, you will be connecting to one of the master nodes. So if that node goes down, you will have to manually connect to the other master node. All right. And in my future video, I will show you how to set up an external load balancer to serve these 2 master nodes. So the architecture will be like this. And in this architecture, the worker nodes will no longer have any local Nginx proxy, and it will rely on an external load balancer. And all the interactions with the API server will go through the HA proxy, and the HA proxy will load balance between the multiple master nodes. And if you're using kubectl on your local machine, you will be connecting to the HA proxy as the load balancer. All right. But Kubespray won't provision us with any external load balancer. So that has to be done by ourselves. And I'll show you how to do that in one of my future videos. All right. So I think that's all I've got. Let's close this. And let's start doing stuff. So that's my server machine that I'm logging in. vbox manage. Okay, so I've got 5 nodes, so we will be using the first 4 nodes for this demo. And I've got an Ansible, which is an LXC container. I just need a machine. I could actually install Ansible on my host machine here and then run the Ansible playbooks on all these machines. But I wanted to show you from scratch how to do that. So that's why I'm creating a new machine, which is an LXC container, just an LXC container. All right, so let me launch another terminal. LXC, sorry, I need to log into my server first. And I'm going to log into the Ansible machine. LXC exec Ansible bash. Okay, so we are inside our Ansible host machine. Ansible machine. The first thing we need to do is we need to set up SSH keys so that root user can log into all these nodes as without password. All right, so let's generate an SSH key on the Ansible machine, or if you're using a host machine, generate an SSH key. SSH key gen. I'm going to go with the defaults, and now we have our key generated, and now we need to copy the key to all the 5 nodes. Although we will be using 4 nodes in this video, I'm going to copy that to all the 5 nodes. All right, so there's a command SSH copy ID root at the IP address of my first server, node 1 is 172.42.42.101. Yes, and the password. All right, so I'm logging in as root to that node 1 machine, and I'm copying my SSH key. So now from this Ansible machine, I should be able to log in as root to this node 1 machine without entering my password. Let's check that. SSH root at 172.42.42.101. Cool. So we are logged into node 1 without having to type the root's password. So that's the requirement. And let's do that for all the machines, because Ansible will be running via SSH. So it will be sending the commands via SSH to all these nodes. And it shouldn't be asking us for the password because we are trying to set up an automated system for provisioning the Kubernetes cluster. All right, so let's do that for the second node. SSH copy ID, the IP address is 172.42.42.102. Yes, and the password. All right, that's done. So now the third machine. Yes, password. And now next we're gonna go to the fourth machine. Yes, password. And finally let's also do the fifth machine. Yes. Alright, so now we have copied our root SSH key from Ansible machine to all the 5 machines, all the 5 Kubernetes machines nodes. Alright, so now let me launch my web browser and go to Kubespray, Kubespray, if I type it correctly. Yep, that's the GitHub page. And in here, I'm going to go to version tag 2.11.0. All right, so let's git clone the repository. Clone, copy that link. And in here, make sure you've got git installed, git clone. And the next thing we're going to do is we need to have Python 3 and Python pip installed. So let's see if it's there. Which Python 3? Yep, I've got Python 3. Which pip 3? No pip 3. Okay, let's install it. And if you don't have Python 3, install Python 3 first. App get install. Let's do app get update first. App get update and app get install Python 3 pip -y. Alright, Python and Python pip is installed. So now cd to Kubespray, which we did a clone, and in here you got to do pip 3 install -r requirements.txt. Alright, that command got all the pip modules, all the required Python modules are installed. Now let's follow the documentation to see how we can install or provision the cluster. So we did that one, pip install requirements.txt. So now we're going to copy the sample cluster configuration. Copy that and paste it here. Make sure you're inside the Kubespray directory. Alright, so that's done. So now we have to declare the IP address. So what we are trying to do here is basically when you want to run Ansible on a cluster of machines, you need to specify the inventory file. So there is something called an inventory file so that Ansible knows which machine to connect to and what roles or what task it needs to run on which machine. So the inventory will have all those details. So you can either write your own inventory, or there is a file inventory.py, a Python script that generates a dynamic inventory for you. So we have that file. For that we need to set what the IP addresses of all our nodes. Let me copy that. And in our case, the IP address of all the machines are, we are going to use the first 4 machines. So 172.42.42.101 space 172.42.42.102, 172.42.42.103, 172.42.42.104. Yep, that's right. And now we can run this command. That will generate the inventory file for us. Copy and paste it. Cool. So the inventory file will be in inventory my cluster and hosts.yaml. Cool. So that's our inventory file that got generated by running this inventory script. So we have the IP address details for all the nodes that we are going to use for this cluster. So we have node 1, node 2, node 3, and node 4. And down here you can see, so kube master is going to be node 1 and node 2. HCD will be node 1, node 2, and node 3. And all the 4 nodes will be Kubernetes worker nodes. So that's the inventory file. So any operations that you're going to do using Ansible playbook, you need to specify this inventory. And let me also show you a couple other files that you need to configure, or you need to be aware of. So these are the 2 files here. So we don't need this anymore. Okay, so first let me look at the first file, vi inventory my cluster groups all.yaml. So here you've got few options. So the load balancer that I was talking about is here. So if you were to use an external load balancer, say if you've got a HA proxy, then you need to specify the load balancer address and the port number here. But for this first video, we are going to use an internal load balancer for API server. So we have this load balancer API server localhost set to true. You don't have to do anything, just to let you know where the configurations are if you ever want to change anything. By default, the load balancer API server type is set to Nginx. If you want, you can use HA proxy. It's all done internally. You don't have to set up anything extra. And the load balancer port and few other options. All right, so that's one file. The other file is vi inventory my cluster group vars k8s cluster.yaml. Right, so here you have some cluster related configurations that if you want you can change it. Kubernetes config directory, cert directory, token directory, and all those things. So here you can see kube version is 1.16.2, image repo, and all those options are here. All right, so let's say I want to deploy a Kubernetes version, a lower version, so that in the next video I can show you how to upgrade a version. All right, at the time of recording this video, it is 1.16.2, the latest version of Kubernetes. So I'm going to say I want to install Kubernetes version 1.15.3, for example. So in my next video, I will show you how to upgrade this to 1.16. Right, so there are other configuration options if you want to change. So those are the 2 files, all.yaml and k8s cluster.yaml. So now we are good to provision our cluster. So all done. So now we are going to run Ansible playbook -i. That's the inventory file. Inventory my cluster host.yaml. and then we are going to specify as which user we want to connect to the machines. User is root, and the file is the playbook is cluster.yaml. So I'm going to run this Ansible playbook. It's going to take, I don't know, on my machine it takes about 20 minutes to provision the cluster. It depends on how many master nodes you've got and how many number of nodes you're trying to provision and so on. So with 16 CPU and 32 gig of memory on my machine with 4 nodes, it will take about 18 to 20 minutes. Alright, so let's run this. It's going to talk to each of the nodes and it will configure everything. So the basic requirement is you need to have a Linux machine. That's it. You don't have to do any setups or anything. You don't have to install Docker. You don't have to disable swap. All the things that are required to run Kubernetes cluster will be taken care by running this Ansible playbook. Let's leave it running, and it's going to take like 18 or 20 minutes. As I said, I'm going to pause the video and come back when it's ready. Alright, so the Ansible playbook has been run, and you can see it took less than 19 minutes. Alright, so we have the Ansible provisioned our Kubernetes cluster, and how do we connect to this cluster? Alright, so I'm on my host machine, make directory.kube, and we are going to download the kube config file from one of the master. As I told you earlier, we haven't created a load balancer, so that we need to connect to one of the Kubernetes master, and if that master goes down, you have to connect to the other other Kubernetes master and download the kube config file. But in the future video, we will see how to set up an external load balancer so you don't have to switch between the masters. So as of now, we have to connect to one of the masters. So node 1 and node 2 are the masters. Let's connect to node 1 and download the kube config file. So I'm going to do SAP root at 172.42.42.101 : the kube config file is etc kubernetes admin.conf, and download that to kube directory as config. Right, yes, and type in the root password. Alright, so that's copied. Now we should be able to run kubectl commands. Kubectl get nodes. Right, cool. So we have our 4 nodes ready, and you can see here node 1 and node 2 are master, and we are on version 1.15.3, kubectl version --short. Yep, don't worry about the client version. I've got the latest client version 1.16. kubectl cluster info. Yep, we have our dashboard as well. kubectl -n kube system get pods. You can see 2 API servers for node 1 and node 2, 2 controller manager, 2 schedulers, and so on. So we have Calico as the overlay network, although that's configurable. So if you want to change the network, switch the network Calico or Flannel, check inventory, my cluster, group vars, k8s cluster.yaml. So here you should be able to choose which network you want. /flannel. Okay, so I think it's not, yep, Kube network plugin Calico. So you can use Calico, Weave, or Flannel. So by default it uses Calico. Alright, so let's do one more testing. Let's see if the interpod communication works, because we are basically testing the Calico overlay network. Alright, so when I do, let me start a couple of busybox containers, and it will get launched on 2 different worker nodes, and then we will see whether we can ping each of them. Alright, kubectl run my shell -it for interactive, --rm to remove the images after we are done, image busybox, and we are going to run a shell inside the busybox container. Kubectl get pods. Alright, container is getting created. Container is running, and if I do -o wide, so it has gone to node 3. Cool. So let's start another one. Kubectl run my shell 2 and the same busybox container. Alright, so if I go to the first busybox container and do hostname -i So that has got the IP address 10.233.92.3, and this one is hostname-i 10.233.105.3. Let's see if we can ping these containers. Ping 10.233.105.3. Cool, we can ping it. Let's do the same testing from this container. Ping 10.233.92.3. Cool. So we are able to ping the pods, ping the containers running on different worker nodes. So that's basically Calico overlay network, and the worker network is Calico overlay network is running fine. kubectl get pods. Right, so that's getting terminated. Cool, so that's it for this video. This video is just about how to use Kubespray's Ansible playbooks to provision your Kubernetes cluster. And we have used the Ansible playbook to provision a 1.15 Kubernetes cluster. And in my next video, I will show you how to upgrade your cluster. It's that simple. You just need to change the Kubernetes version in one of the configuration file. And then instead of running cluster.yaml, you're going to be running upgrade.yaml file. It's a separate playbook for upgrading your cluster. And we will see that in the next video. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.